This afternoon, I'm in Denver at the Supreme Court of Colorado Law Library, and I'm talking with the Deputy Librarian, Christopher D Hudson. Thank you, Chris, for agreeing to sit with me before the camera this morning, or this afternoon actually. We've just passed the lunch hour, and be part of our oral history of law librarianship. I believe that those watching the videos have an interest in knowing about the participants as people as well as colleagues. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself as a person, perhaps about your life today and even when you were younger?
I would be happy to. First, let me say that it's an honor to be selected to be in this group, and I certainly appreciate.
I don't want
what
to
you
stroke
do.
your ego too much,
Yeah.
but you know it's difficult to decide who we will talk to, and we do have set criteria that we follow, and you meet it.
I very much appreciate
Meet it very well, in
the
fact.
opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you. About me personally, I was born in Spokane, Washington, and I grew up in Moscow, Idaho.
Yeah.
I spent my early years in Moscow as I think what we would call today maybe a free-range kid.
Mm-hmm.
It was a wonderful place to grow up. It was small enough where I had ample opportunity to be outdoors all the time, but it's a university town, so I had also the opportunity to experience a lot of culture and education and other things that you might not get other places.
Now I know the Washington State side of that, and the two college towns, literally Moscow and the one in Washington, are in the so-called Palouse country. Is that the same name used on the Idaho side?
That's exactly right. Yeah, the most I think beautiful place in the world. Rolling hills of wheat and other crops. It is a wonderful place if you haven't been there before. Yeah.
Well, I have fortunately been to both. Actually, Moscow, because the law school there, I interviewed our colleague who's the director there some time ago, and then went up to your other town, Spokane, to Gonzaga, to talk with the director there for the oral history. So I get around, and it's one of the pleasures of this point in life I can do that. Well, I sort of follow up a little bit about you as a person by also amplifying that and asking if there are any hobbies or other special passions or interests that you occupy time with.
Yeah, my number one, maybe it's not a hobby, but the number one thing that I do apart from work is family.
Mm-hmm.
I have a 13-year-old daughter, Frances, and she occupies most of my time. So her
I'm
hobbies
not surprised.
are now my hobbies for sure.
Yeah.
And I'd say in addition to that, I do some of the same things that I do here at work. I am a collector of many things, most of them related to Colorado, books, art, ephemera, and things related to Colorado history. So I spend a lot of time browsing the junk shops.
Do you travel around the state a bit too?
A little bit, yeah. Mostly just here in the Front Range,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's fun.
My son and my son's traveling with me on this trip, and we've been making a road trip. We came in from the desert Southwest, but we stopped in Durango out in the corner of the southwest corner of the state the other night, and it was nice. It was interesting to see the town too, because their theme is the old style town, and in the Rocky West, and tons of tourists in town. Even it's April, so I don't know what July will bring for them, but I'll bet a lot more.
It's probably one of my favorite areas of Colorado, especially Mesa Verde.
Yeah. Well, we had a most pleasant drive through the mountains too the other day too. So it's a nice state.
You can't go wrong in Colorado, and I'm somewhat sad to say I'm not a native, but I'm proud to be a native Idahoan.
Yeah.
But I've been here long enough that I can claim Colorado as home for sure.
Okay, well, that sounds like a good idea.
Yeah.
Winter. Can I now begin to focus on you as a professional, as
Sure.
a colleague?
Okay.
You have 3 degrees.
I do.
I know that, and can you tell me or tell us what they are and from which schools you got them?
Sure. So I have a bachelor's degree from the University of Idaho in English and French. I have a Juris Doctor from the University of Colorado in Boulder, and a Master's of Library and Information Science from the University of Denver here in Denver.
Even though you haven't mentioned the years, my notes indicate that you had a few years after your baccalaureate degree before you went to law school.
I did.
Tell us a little bit about those years. What you
Sure,
did.
I'd be happy to. So I guess I should start. I graduated from high school in 1990. When I was 17 when I graduated, and I almost immediately left home. I went overseas and traveled for almost a year in different countries in Europe, and I had
That must have been absolutely fabulous.
It was wonderful. I had the good fortune of attending a Jesuit high school for a year in Belgium. So I lived in Belgium kind of off and on during my entire undergraduate career. And so I didn't spend 6 years going to school to get my undergraduate degrees, but I did some other things during that time period. I graduated from the University of Idaho in 1996, and after did a number of odd jobs and traveled some more. Much of the time after my undergraduate degree was in Alabama. That's where my wife is from, and she was finishing her schoolwork at the University of Alabama in Tuscaloosa.
So not only did you travel extensively in Europe, it looks like you get around a bit in this country.
I've been around the U.S. a little bit too.
Now, you went to law school, and then there was a gap before you went to library school, if my notes are correct. And what did you do in the meantime? Did you practice law or do anything like that?
Yeah, so that's exactly right. I graduated from University of Colorado School of Law in 2002. I practiced here in Colorado for a short period. I worked for a small firm in Longmont, Colorado for just over 2 years. My daughter, Frances, was born in 2004, and I quit my practice and was a stay-at-home dad for a number of years before I went back to library school. So probably maybe the best years so far were those where I got to stay home with my daughter.
Well, there's some good years coming up, I think, because your daughter, of course, will be a typical teenager. She'll start to pull away from her folks, but you want to see that too. It sort of adds sort of trauma to some of the relationship, but you never know. I have a grandson exactly at the same point in life, 13, back in Michigan, and I enjoy seeing him periodically.
We couldn't be happier.
Yeah. Well, you now have been here at the court since May of 2012, according to my notes, as the deputy law librarian. Can I ask you how it was you decided to become a law librarian, and even more specifically, did any particular individual or individuals play a role in helping you come to that realization that this was the way you wanted to proceed?
Sure. So it was a long road, which I think it is for many people that come to law librarianship. It wasn't my first career choice, but it was one that was always, I think, out there for me. It was just waiting for me to come to it. In law school, I worked as a research assistant for the late Dean David Getches, and part of my job, most of my job for him, kept me in the library. So I got to work with CU's law librarians almost on a daily basis. And there were several librarians there who I just thought they had the best job in the world. Namely Barbara Bintliff, who was the director at that time.
Yeah, she's down in Texas
and
now.
She's down in Texas now, yes, she's doing great things. And Jane Thompson, who is their faculty services librarian. She, at that point, taught our Intro to the Library course. And I thought that what she got to do was just wonderful. She got to do research and work with faculty. And in particular, there was a librarian who I don't think is in law libraries still, but his name was Mitch Fontenot, who was, I believe, the head of the reference staff and circulation staff. And he was kind of a bright light, I think, at CU. Every time you went into the library, he knew who you were, he knew what you were working on, and he had a good word to say to brighten up your day.
Mhm.
And
Those are few and far between who know that much detail about that many people.
yeah, and he was wonderful. And I have to say that he was really an inspiration for me to look for a career where I could do something of that nature where I could affect the people that I was around every day.
Mhm. Well, this sort of brings to a question I like to pose about this point in these conversations, and that is, do you have anybody that you consider to be a mentor, or more than one? And I think you've just named perhaps
Sure.
a few of them, but you want to be more specific about that?
Sure, yeah, I've had a number of mentors who have guided me to where I am today. In my undergraduate career, there was an English professor, the dean of the college, who really helped me look outside of the small town where we were. His name was Gary Williams. In law school, David Getches was, and he continues to be, an influence on who I am and how I work. He was tireless in the work that he put in for the school, for the many projects that he was responsible for, and for the people that he worked with. He really inspired me to make myself available in that same way as best as I can. In library school, I was also a research assistant for Dr. Sylvia Hall Ellis, and she really taught me a lot about what it means to be a professional. And then out of library school, I was initially hired here at the Supreme Court by Dan Cordova, who is the current library director, and he continues to be a supporter and certainly a mentor.
Well, that's nice. I had the opportunity to talk with him on camera just a few minutes ago.
That's
So
right.
the two of you are both going to be part of this history.
That's great.
I hope that's a positive thing.
That's a wonderful thing. Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm very proud to be here. Yeah.
Well, why don't we talk a little bit about what you do here at the library? You're the deputy librarian, or law librarian. And I know that the library is actually, there are a number of double-degreed librarians on staff who do different reference sorts of things. And I assume part of your role is reference too, but I don't know. Could I ask you to talk about your work?
Be happy to. Yeah. So we are a relatively small library and a relatively small library staff. We typically have between 5 and 8 librarians on staff. And we like to hire dual degree folks here, and we've been very lucky to attract the people that we have here. My job, just like everyone's job here at the library, is a little bit of everything. I do a lot of our budgeting, I do most of our collection development, I do our staffing, I also work the reference desk, and I also shelf the books. And so we all do a little bit of everything.
Well, I remember my real early days in the library. I saw the same thing. I was part of it as a student, and it was, everybody did a little of everything.
That's right, yeah.
In some ways, I would think that would make the job a little more interesting, because not everything is the same day after day.
I think I have the best job in libraries because I get to make decisions that affect the library, and I get to guide the library in a way that I think is positive for our future. But I also get to do all the other things that I love to do. I get to interact with the public. I get to work with our judges and justices on an individual basis, and I get to work with our staff, who are wonderful, wonderful people.
I was once in the deputy role, or we didn't call it that, such a lofty title in those days, but it was a nice role. I was given a lot of autonomy and independence to do things by my director, my boss, and yet I didn't have quite the responsibility that went with the top job. And there's an upside and a downside to that. One of the upsides is you don't have quite that worry.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, In preparing for today's conversation, I noticed that you have been active professionally. You've been secretary and president of the Colorado Association of Law Libraries. You want to talk about some of your work in that and other professional outreach things, and perhaps why you aspire to do some of that?
Sure, I'd be happy to. I guess I'd start by saying before I took on those leadership roles in our local state association, Colorado Association of Law Libraries, I was active with the association in library school, and I was very fortunate to work with a number of dedicated and very kind people, people that accepted me into the profession almost immediately, even as a student. Even before they probably should have done so. And especially, I should say thank you to the people at the librarians at the Westminster Law Library at the University of Denver. During my time there, they answered my questions, they gave me their time from the top to the bottom. The director was Gary Alexander at that time, and the entire library staff opened their doors to me and made me feel very welcome to the profession. And so part of participating in the local chapter for me is carrying that forward for other people. We're a small group. We have maybe 80 to 90 members. It fluctuates. But the membership turns over enough that, or not enough sometimes, that often the people who have been in the society the longest have done the role, they've done the work a number of times.
Yeah.
And so for me, to step up as the secretary was the first step in giving back to our local community. And then as the president, because it was a needed role, and it was my time to take on that role. I was happy to do it.
Now, have you been active at all beyond the Colorado group and the broader regional chapter for this area, which I think is Western Pacific, but I'm not sure you're in the transition zone?
Yeah, so no, and mostly I've been involved with our state chapter, which is the Colorado Association of Law Libraries, and I follow and attend the national conventions.
Well, you'll be on your way perhaps to Baltimore, I think is where it is this year. Perhaps.
This year it's in Baltimore.
Yeah, and then next year I think it's in DC.
I think that's right, yeah.
This is 2018 to set this. This is the people watching this may not know what year we're talking about for some good reason. Yeah. So I'll mention it. Yeah, and so it sounds like you've been involved. As you say, it comes around. There aren't that many, but it's still important work to do, and you get to know people, I think, when you get involved professionally in the organizations. Yeah. Are you involved with some of the stuff out of the library here in the sort of the state government sphere? Because you're right, literally, in the middle of downtown Denver, but the Capitol is over a block, and it's a beautiful building, and you're in this nice building here. And, other state agencies probably are a lot of your immediate neighbors.
They are, yeah.
So do you get involved other than from the library standpoint of helping them?
And we certainly do, yeah. We are open to all government agencies, open to the public, open to the bar, and we serve all of those folks. And we are keenly aware of the need for our services, especially for many of the government agencies, and so they will come to us individually with special research projects and whatnot, and we work with them on a one-on-one basis, and that often works through either me or through Dan here at the library.
Well, in Colorado, of course, this is a state that doesn't have a collection of public law libraries throughout the various counties, or even 2 law schools, but in some states there are more than that. There were like 8 of them in the city I used to work in, but that was DC. So you must do a lot with lawyers and others from around the state as well, and who are sort of your people that work with the library to get resources.
Yeah, we're very proud to offer that service in Colorado. Yeah, you're right. There are 2 law schools here. us, and then there's a library at the circuit court at the federal library.
Now, you are fairly new to the field, and as you've said yourself a few minutes ago, but do you have any thoughts about where the law library, this one in particular, the profession itself, may be headed over the next few years?
I do. I mean, I have more thoughts about where this library is headed. But the profession, I think the future of the profession is very bright. And I think that because, for me, the purpose of law libraries and of all libraries, has never changed. We are here to collect and to preserve and to renew and to make available our cultural history for the people that need it now and for those people that may need it in the future. And that's a responsibility that I take very seriously. And I know that there are many other people in the field who feel the same way. And as long as there are those people out there that look at their collections and look at their footprints and the people that they serve in that light, I think that the future of libraries is very bright. We have a great future. Here at this particular library, we are very, and I'm sure Dan talked your ear off about it in your interview with him, but we are very forward-thinking about service. Our primary mission is customer service here in this library. And we do that on a daily basis, and we work very hard to provide the services, not only that our primary clients need, our judges and our justices and our clerks here in this building, but that the people of Colorado need. And Dan has been very, very good at marketing our services and expanding our footprint. So we've gone from being kind of a small library that served Denver and the bar here to being a library that serves our entire judiciary and our entire state. And so that has been part of Dan's legacy here at the library, and I support that for sure. Part of what I want my legacy to be at this library is the preservation and rediscovery of the collection of print materials that we have collected over the last 100 years. We've been a library as long as Colorado has been a state, actually longer. We were the territorial library, and our print collection reflects all of those years of material. And we have a significant collection of culturally important items that have been, I think, long forgotten. And so part of what I feel my job is, and one of my greatest joys here at the library, is to rediscover that material, preserve it, and make it accessible to the library users of the future and now.
So you see part of the role of the library as sort of as the archive of last resort for this sort of stuff at the state legal system, the old cases, the old statutes, I assume.
I think that's exactly right. Yeah. Dan would say that we are a vacuum cleaner of materials, and I would agree with
It's an interesting term, but I understand it.
And so we love to accept materials from the public, from the bar, from anyone else who is discarding, and we are aware of the fact that we don't know what the person 80 years from now will need from our library. And just as we are thankful to the carekeepers who have come before us, who were smart enough to look at the materials that they had in front of them and to keep those things and make them available.
Well, part of our role is also to identify what is important and legitimate, as opposed to, in today's world, it may be harder with everything on the internet, including an awful lot of propaganda, false information, and not so much, I suppose, in the old days, but that's part of the role I think that we as librarians are going to have in the future, is identifying what we ought to keep, what we ought to have available, sort of curating.
I think that's exactly right. And one of the things that we say here in our library is that when we are asked a question, our answer will not be wrong. And it won't be wrong because we won't give an answer unless we have tangible proof of what that answer is.
Mhm.
And so part of that job is making sure that we continue to keep those materials here, electronic and print, so that we can answer those questions definitively in the future.
Yeah. Well, it certainly is an interesting time to be a law librarian or any kind of a librarian or someone dealing with information. I'm sure because of the empowerment that all this digital media coming into the field is added to what we already had in terms of doing a lot of this work.
Well, and I would say the access now is astronomical. Even in my short time in law and library, it has grown in a way that I don't think we could have foreseen 10 years ago or certainly 20 years ago.
Well, probably not. I used to sit back, and I suspect others in my cohort, shall we say, in our field, look back at our predecessors and the libraries that they started in and they ended up in were not that different from each other. Although they may have started to have to catalog things because they were getting more individual treatises and stuff for the most part. But then we began to experience the change, and we thought, well, our predecessors didn't have this sort of excitement in their lives. That Lexis came in, Westlaw, and all the databases that follow, and of course today it's a whole new world. Your group must be looking even at my group and saying, gee, they had it easier. The changes were occurring, but they were a lot slower. Maybe you haven't thought that out, but
well, I mean, for me personally, I believe it's all the same. I mean, all librarians throughout history have had changes in media, changes in practice, but we've all done the same thing. I mean, we've taken our duty to preserve and make accessible these items or things, whether they're electronic now or book or paper or stone, and we have organized and we have kept, and so I don't think my job is any different from the librarian that came 100 years ago.
Well, that's an interesting observation, and probably pretty valid, actually. I mean, they worked with what was the media of the day, and we worked with the media of our day.
That's right.
Well, maybe on that basis, Chris, we're probably nearing the end of today's conversation, but it's customary to ask if there's anything we've not talked about that you would like to bring up, or if you'd like to elaborate on something that we may have talked about.
No, not really. I mean, I only would like to...
Well, that's the answer I get from most people.
Yeah. I express my gratitude for this process and for this project. I think it's a wonderful thing to collect not only things, but to be able to collect people. And that's what you're doing. You're collecting people. And so thank you for doing this.
Well, it's been a fascinating experience for me. I've been privileged for about 6 years to be able to do this. And getting to know in a different way, even many of the people I've known for years in the profession. And the work they do, I mean, it's really a nice opportunity. And I have appreciated your willingness to be part of it today, and also for coming out even on the street as my son and I drove up with the appropriate gadget to get us into the parking garage and back out at the end. You said we have to have the same thing, and you've been a wonderful host this morning and early afternoon. I appreciate that very much. Christopher, in thanking you, I want to thank you on my behalf. I had the fun of coming for being part of this, but also I'm thanking you on behalf of Michelle Wu, Frank Hodak, and Dick Spinelli, who are our colleagues with whom I've had the privilege of working to put together this oral history for the Spinelli's Law Library Reference Shelf portion of Hein Online. Thank you.
It's been my pleasure.